Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Advocacy Hour. This month we've been focusing a lot on Gen Z leadership and advocacy because they are the demographic that is stepping up, showing up, and we want to get involved in that conversation, even though we're both geriatric millennials.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Why not? So, okay, let's talk about why Gen Z leadership matters so much right now. Rebecca, you have the floor.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about who is Gen Z because I know I don't know if other people are like me. I'm always having to Google it, so we're just gonna
Yes.
provide the
All of,
definition.
I feel like I
Um,
always have to Google all of the like what are the labels, I guess, because I'm like, wait, what
yes,
demographic falls under this? So yes, lay it on
I
us.
know my youngest is Gen Alpha. That's all I know, and I'm like, calm down. But Gen
It's a
Z
Gen
is,
Alpha.
yeah, Howard is a Gen Alpha. He is. I know. I think
Okay,
it's so
all right.
silly. But Gen Z is also known as the Zoomers, which
See,
I
I
did
didn't
not
know
know.
that. Nope.
And it is a cohort of people born between 1997 and 2012, succeeding the millennials and preceding Gen Alpha. They are the first to fully grow up in the digital age, shaped heavily by the rise of smartphones, social media, and global connectivity. And I can say I remember my oldest, who's born in 2003. I got the first iPhone when he was in kindergarten. So just thinking about like the iPod was before the like, digital age has fully been present in the Gen Z demographic. So
I'm not.
while
I'm
we
not
had
gonna.
to
I'm not.
learn it,
We
they've always known
100%
it.
had to learn it, and that's the thing. I'm not like ragging on Gen Z. I think they're a great generation, but I still think millennials are absolutely the best generation because of that little fact that you just said, that we grew up without all of this stuff and then had to grow with it and make it a part. And so we're the ones that know everything. We know everything
Yeah.
that our parents had, and we know everything that these kids today have. We're the most verse, and what is the word I'm looking for? Um, not multi hyphenate, but you get what I'm saying. We know how to do it all. We're across the board. I feel like I remember having an IBM
We
computer, and I
do.
also remember, like you said, having my first iPhone. We know how to do everything. We're amazing,
And
but it's no
we
knock
have
on
the
Gen
weirdest
Z.
email addresses, I feel like.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, what was yours?
I feel
What
like
was
we
yours?
had weird email addresses, right? Because
I
they
need
all
to know
got
what
their
yours
like
is.
first name, last name numbers at their school. Mine was moongoddess17 at hotmail.com. And it was spelled incorrectly because I didn't realize goddess had two D's in it. And I think it's really funny because I was full on like youth group leader and yet still had this like very woo woo email address.
Mine was Debrat08 at AOL.com because Debrat was my favorite rapper growing up.
Nice. But at AOL, you had AOL.
Yeah, take it back. Had to wait for the dial up, okay? That's where we were. I had to wait for that little yellow man to run across the screen and tell me that it was okay. And then if my sister like picked up the phone and messed everything up, that's what we were growing
Yep.
up with, y'all,
Had to
okay?
start over. Gen Z knows nothing about it.
They
The
don't, but they
resilience.
are very,
Oh,
very engaged. They are very engaged
yes.
demographic, which I love. So about 32% of Gen Z are actually regularly involved in activism and social justice work. And that jumps to nearly 40% when you get into the college age. And then 51% of Gen Z have actually participated in rallies or protests, which I think is really great because they want to get involved.
Yeah.
They want to stand up for something. I think that's wonderful because advocacy isn't just happening in like traditional power centers anymore. It's happening online, it's happening in communities, and through different forms of culture. And so their participation in volunteer and service work is actually up to 80% of Gen Z,
Just,
which I think is
just
incredible.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Volunteering was
really.
not really in my mind when I was like in my early and mid 20s.
Yeah, not
It
at all.
just wasn't, well, and I also
No.
had a child, so I'm like fully focused on that, which is
Right,
very
sure.
easy to do, but it is in their like the zeitgeist of Gen Z to like we must be participating in this public, like more public out-facing advocacy, caring for people, being part of their communities, whether that's in college, like you said, or just in wherever they are. They
Hmm.
seem to
Hmm.
have an understanding about community that maybe we had to learn and they just kind of know it. But maybe we
Well,
can say we created that and they have taken it a
yeah,
step
I
further.
I just think community was maybe different for us back then. Like it felt a little bit more
Yeah.
natural and not something we had to find or even define.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
don't know. That's at least my experience. I feel like going through school and I'm just thinking back to even elementary school and junior high and high school, like I just always was with some group of friends and it was a natural just thing that I fell into. I don't think that I had to actually find community. I think people have to find
Hmm.
community more now. I think it's because we're also so very isolated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I do think that that's a really good point. And probably the digital part hasn't helped that. I mean, we talk about that a lot. It's so easy to get so caught up in what's going on online and
Hmm.
forget that these we have neighbors and we have people that we could connect with in real life. I think that is something I do feel challenged by with
Yeah.
some of my Gen Z friends. I have a couple of girlfriends in my life who are 30 and 31, and I am just constantly impressed by the way that they show up in the world, and
Mm.
also how they challenge me to show up differently. I feel like I've done a lot of deconstructing around these ideas, and they push me even further still. And so I really
Yeah.
do appreciate it. I'm like a huge, I think every millennial woman should have a Gen Z really good or close best friend. Like, I just think it's
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I love how you say that they're challenging you, but they're also challenging the way our systems are set up. They're challenging leadership a little bit more. They're getting
Yep.
really involved in politics and advocacy. Gen Z in particular, well, that's also something that I think the social age and the digital age has given people a little bit more fire under them. They're a little bit more bold when it comes to
Yeah.
challenging people in authority. But there was a statistic that said that 33% of Gen Z have contacted elected officials about an issue that they had a problem with. And I love that. I love that. I didn't really start calling my elected officials until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So that was still
Same.
in my 30s, right? Because I was just like, oh, what difference is going to make? Or I don't want to talk to them. Like that was my biggest thing. I didn't want to talk to them. Gen Z was like, no, I'm going to call you. I'm going to blow your phone up and you're going to talk to me and you're going to listen to what I have to say. And I love that. I love how passionate they are about advocacy. I really do.
Yeah. I hope that my kids are just as passionate as some of these other young adults that we're seeing these days. I think they're getting there, but I love, like, to your point, I don't think that I felt like I had a right to say anything, or like I just didn't have the
Mm,
confidence to do that. And there's something about like these kids that have kids, I'm going to call them all kids, I don't care how old they are, because they're all much younger than me.
right,
But
right.
they're showing up on social media every day, and it's just a part of their life. Like I
Yeah.
remember when selfies got to be like, I don't know, my very young cousin was taking a lot of selfies, and I was like, this is so weird. But it's that kind of mentality of like, no, I get to actually take up space and have something to say, and you know, have a presence wherever I go. And that is just a thing that I didn't grow up with. Whether
Yeah.
that is a product of growing up in the evangelical church as a female, or if that's like just a generational thing, maybe combination of both. Don't get too big for your britches kind of idea. And
Mm,
I think there's a level of like this toxic humbleness that we're taught not to be too, don't let your head get too
present.
big,
Yeah.
and it's just like, no, they're saying, no, I'm going to be here and you're going to hear what I have
Yeah.
to say. And I get to, and I have a right to. And I love
Yeah.
that so much. That is one of the
Yeah.
things I feel challenged by a lot. It's like, why
Yeah.
shouldn't I say something actually?
100%. They're showing up to lead, and I think that, like
Yeah.
you said, it's challenging you and making you think just about things differently. And I think that that's really important because I think also a lot of people that are older tend to have these preconceived notions about younger generations, and they don't know anything yet, or they don't know how to lead, or they don't know what these things mean. They haven't lived yet, and it's like we've been completely immersed into the world. So like they know what they're talking about. They know how to
Yeah.
lead, and I think it's really important that we support them in what they want to do and show up, and we can also take notes from them. But this is a question for you before we get into our guests. What responsibility do we have, not necessarily to control how they're leading, but to support them and to equip them and also have them learn from us? Because I also don't want them talking to me like I'm some elderly person, but I also want them
Right.
to like I'll You know what I mean? I'll cut you down, but I want to have a conversation with them because I do want to support what they're saying, but I also want them to learn from us as well because we are the next generation after them. So, what responsibility do you think that we have to really show up and support them?
I think the same thing I have, the conclusion I've come to in my deconstruction about most things, I think applies
Mhm.
here too, and that is to have a sense of curiosity around what is
Mm,
being said in opposition to a certainty because I have lived longer and so therefore I know more, but instead to say their experience is probably different than mine, and so I'm going to be curious about what their experience is actually bringing to them as far as wisdom.
mm,
I had a conversation with my daughter yesterday, and we were talking actually about the story of Adam and Eve. And she's 19, and she's a fashion major. And actually, her whole thing was if that hadn't happened, then fashion wouldn't even be necessary, right? It was and it was a much broader conversation than that. But I was like, whoa, what a cool thought. Like, I want to talk more about that as opposed to, like, I could have said that's silly or whatever. This like certainty of it means this very specific thing, and
yeah,
instead
yeah,
saying, wow, it could be mean something actually really different, and it could mean something
yeah.
different to you. And so just bringing curiosity into these conversations, you know, to your point, we've lived these lives. I think we've gotten certain, we've gotten jaded, we've gotten whatever we think we know better because we've had more experience. We've needed to be more resilient. We've needed to have more answers. And I wish that people had looked at me when I was younger and thought that I knew something. And so I want
Mm,
to give the benefit of like the fullness of their humanity and just see what that has to
absolutely.
offer the world.
That's beautiful. Yeah, millennials, we've definitely been carrying our share of the weight. I look at all
Yeah,
the things that we've experienced. I'm like, we are tired. We are tired. But that's why
so
developing
tired.
Gen Z leaders and Gen Z advocates and voices is so important right now. And there is a beautiful fire within this generation coming up behind us. They're very passionate and they do have a desire to see real change. And so when we come back, we are going to be chatting with Jennifer Borrero, who is the founder of Common Ground Development, and she does a lot of training and work with Gen Z leaders. So we'll be right back with this conversation with Jennifer Borrero. Hey everyone, we are back, and today we are joined by Jennifer Borrero. She's the founder of Common Ground Development, which is a national organization mobilizing faith leaders to advance justice, protect democracy, and build a more equitable society. She believes leadership is not about individual success, but it's about creating conditions for others to move forward. As the founder of Common Ground Development, she works where housing, leadership, and community development meet. She helps organizations and communities turn their ideas into action, which is what we are all about here on Advocacy Hour. She's also a TEDx speaker and a 30 under 30 honoree. She has warmth and practicality that she brings to the stage, and she weaves her personal stories with frameworks that audiences can use immediately. Her current project, a documentary series on housing and belonging across cultures, reflects her commitment to storytelling as a tool for change. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we're going to just jump right in here with our first question. Since this podcast is all about advocacy work, what first drew you into this type of work, this advocacy work? And was there like a specific moment that made it feel really personal or really urgent for you?
Sure. So my career began in healthcare administration and patient advocacy in healthcare organizations. And I started noticing that pretty much all roads led back to housing. If you don't have a car or transportation to a grocery store, it's really hard to get healthy foods. If you don't have access to being able to get to a doctor, you're not going to be very healthy. Depending on where you live, that determines where your kids are going to be able to go to school. So a lot of these social determinants of health seem to go back to your zip code and where you lived. And that's when I really started to hone in on housing. How do we make sure that housing is accessible and affordable to everyone? And it was very clear that that was not the case. And what prevented this housing from being built in certain neighborhoods was the kind of the lack of advocacy or the lack of voices being present in the city council room or the zoning room saying, hey, I actually would love to have this affordable housing development here. And that's when I started to kind of put the pieces together that housing or advocacy specifically for housing and the built environment and our communities and our neighborhoods was something that really needed to be kind of fleshed out further so that the everyday person, community members, neighbors would be able to have their voices be heard by city council members and other elected officials.
That's so important that you're focusing on that because I actually think housing is one of the things that we all need, but there isn't enough conversation
Yeah.
around it. And I love that you said advocacy when you're talking about this. So, what does that word mean to you, and how is it different from activism or lobbying? Like, how do you differentiate between those terms for people?
Sure. So activism is really about raising awareness. We want to disrupt the status quo. So it's what you often see in the news as far as protests, things that are very publicly facing. I want to disrupt a meeting. I want to create awareness on this topic. Lobbying is where a specific person is being paid to engage with elected officials and try to kind of convince them, hey, this specific perspective that I have is the right way to go. And I think that you should vote with my intentions and my needs in mind. Advocacy is, in a way, it's lobbying, but without the paid member. It's really everyday community members coming together, agreeing on we want this specific thing out of our neighborhood, and having conversations with city council members, with different forms of elected officials, letter campaigns, petitions, showing up at meetings and being very vocal in saying what you do want or don't want. It might not appear as grand as some of the activism that you see in the news because there's not a protest, there's not maybe a picket sign. It's kind of you just showing up at a meeting, and it might not sound very exciting at times, but it is, I think it's one of the most meaningful ways to actually create specific political policy change.
Sure, and I think they all three have their place, right, in this ecosystem of when you're
Absolutely.
trying to show up and make a difference. And I think some people think like, oh, I'm not an activist. It's like, well, you don't have to be an activist. You can be an advocate or
Mhm.
you can lobby. And I think that that's really important. I'm glad that you were able to say those different definitions for people because I think people are always looking, where's my place? Where can I show up? So that was really good to hear. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you made it really easily accessible, right? Like lobbying is to me, I've always assumed it's a lot more formal. Like I was just visiting my state capitol building, and there are offices there that are specific to lobbyists, right? And that's very different than like I could go to like a city council meeting, like you said, and advocate for a very specific thing and take community time to speak to that. So I love the distinctions and making it a little bit more accessible for people. Um, so I was looking at your website, and I know we introduced you and talked a little bit about being a TEDx speaker, and I did listen to the majority of your speech, and I thought it was really interesting because you talked in there about the American dream. You talked about how maybe that could be different to different people, and you talked about varying definitions of success as well. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit today about the American dream, what it means to you, and maybe how that's changed as you have participated in this advocacy work, and maybe how that's impacted your ideas around success as well.
Sure. So the American dream is very interesting because if you look it up, if you try to find a concrete definition, there is no one specific thing that defines the American dream. The definition can be different for anyone, and I think the actual definition is that everyone has the same opportunity to advance and grow and reach whatever they want to achieve. So it's very vague and broad. But I was always raised with the idea of the house with the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the dog. That was kind of the American dream. And the purchasing of a house was critical in being able to check that box. So for
Yeah.
me, housing has always been a critical component of reaching that. And I think for a lot of people in my generation, home ownership was part of the American dream. And what I'm seeing now is that a lot of people in my generation feel that they've done what they were supposed to do. They've done what they've been told to do. Maybe they went to college, maybe they got the degree, maybe they got 2 degrees. They did what they thought was the right thing, and they're still not able to achieve that quote unquote American dream. So where do we go from here? How do we reconcile that? I think for me, the definition for that has changed because it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to home ownership. But I think we can
Sure.
all agree that we want to be able to pay our bills and survive and be able to, if you are doing what you are supposed to be doing, to be able to thrive and have a healthy, sustainable existence in this world. So I think that definition of a dream has changed for people across the board. But I think when you get to a point where you feel that you were promised something for doing a certain thing and you're not getting it back, you start to lose a little bit of hope. So part of
Sure.
my work is to try to reinvigorate and reinject that hope into our generation, to know that there are still ways that we can push back to make that dream become a reality.
I love that you're addressing this because it is one of those things where it's like, I did everything right. I did
Yeah,
everything that
exactly.
I was told. And now I feel like I was fed a lie, right? That's how a lot of people are
Yep.
feeling. But I love that you saw that. And then you also started these organizations to give people hope, but also to say, like, if we're going to change the dream, let's do it together. So you founded the Youth Housing Coalition, you started Common Ground Development. And so with all this work that you've done and you've seen kind of what the general vibe is, I guess, within this generation of feeling left behind and not like we're not getting the things that we were promised. What has made you what you're most proud of the work that you're doing, and what do you think also still needs to happen in the work that you're doing?
I think what makes me most proud is with Youth Housing Coalition being able to work with high school students and
Mm,
going through a very in real time exercise of, okay, let's take your address on your personal computer and let's look up who represents you. What is your In Atlanta, we have NPUs, neighborhood planning units, which are kind of the neighborhood level organizations that then feed up to city council. So it's kind of the smallest, most local level of representation that we have. So being able to work with high school students to identify who represents you at a city council level. It's not just the mayor. Who represents you in your NPU? What is your NPU? I want you to attend a meeting and let me know what are the things that are being discussed, like what's going on in your neighborhood, and seeing their innate interest. And at first I thought maybe high school students aren't really going to be interested in this, but you would be surprised at how many students voluntarily go to these because they want people to know, yes, as a student, I care what's going on and I want there to
mm,
be affordable places to live. And that in itself also changes the mindset of maybe the people that are running those meetings that think, oh, young people are very apathetic and they don't care of what's going on in their neighborhood. So it's really great to see that dynamic change in real time. Something that I still think we need to work on is, once we have people that are showing up to these meetings and maybe are voicing their opinions, which is great. When it comes to a neighborhood actually growing and developing, how do we make sure that the people that have been in that neighborhood for decades, sometimes generations, are the ones that are able to benefit from all of this monetary growth and that they are not then kicked out and displaced from this? So that's part of the work that I do is, yes, I want your voice to be heard, but I also want you to be able to stay in your neighborhood and not be fearful that
hmm
development is going to then harm you.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
really great.
That is really powerful work that you're doing. And as a parent of two Gen Z human beings, I can attest to the fact that they are much more opinionated. And I mean that in like all the positive sense. Like they are very thoughtful about what they think. They have read about it. They are doing research about it. They are not just having opinions. And I think a lot of that we could say is the availability of information is so much more than like when I was their age, for example. I am interested. You brought up this, there are older people maybe living in these neighborhoods and seeing these younger people have more willingness or desire to participate. What do you see as the biggest shift in maybe how this younger generation, Gen Z, is approaching power, leadership, and advocacy? And then how are they connecting with those older generations?
I think the way that differs for this generation is that, and it kind of goes back to what you mentioned, the availability of information is coming through various channels now, whether it's online, whether it's, yes, through traditional print news media, whether it's through television news media, but also through social networks. So I think the way that they are showing up when it comes to their version of activism or advocacy looks different from previous generations, where they might be a lot more tuned in to social networks that to groups that are active from an advocacy perspective, but it's on TikTok or it's on Substack. And that looks different from what's been done before. I think they are okay with finding different avenues of getting involved and being okay with pushing against the status quo of the only way that I can be heard is by showing up to said city council meeting on a specific day. I think they're looking for different ways that are more accessible to everyone to get involved. And I think that speaks to the way that our civic engagement processes are changing in general, where we usually have a very specific funnel of information and how these things are being communicated and how we as community members can then communicate to our elected officials. I think that is changing in real time as well.
We have actually here at TNE, we spent a lot of time this last month focusing on the Gen Z demographic. We just did a couple of workshops for parents of Gen Z and then for Gen Z that wanted to get activated and figure out how to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we found in some of these conversations is that they're very values driven and they're very justice oriented. And so when you're doing your work, like how do you, so this is kind of a two-part question, but how do you help these younger leaders translate the values that they have into effective leadership in the real world? And also, what skills and mindsets do you try to prioritize that maybe traditional leadership models tend to overlook?
Sure. So when I think this is so relevant because when it comes to advocacy discussions and sometimes arguments, I think the rhetoric is, or the thought process is, if I provide enough facts, you are going to change your mind and you will agree with me. And studies show that that's not the case. Most actual change happens because of relationships that are built, because of trust that is built with communities, because of shared identity, repeated exposure to the same people, and even personal experience. Like, I didn't believe in this thing until it happened to me, and now I do believe in it. So I think this values-driven approach that Gen Z has is very valuable, because when it comes to policy, politics, we can get caught up in what the paper says,
Sure.
and it can increase political polarization between groups that might not agree on the technical solution. But when we approach it from a values-driven perspective of, hey, I also care about this neighborhood. I also want to be able to go to the park and walk my dog and feel safe. You're not alone in worrying about neighborhood safety, and being able to find those shared experiences and identity and bridge that gap to show that we are really not that different. We want the same things out of our communities. I think that's a great foundation to then be able to establish, okay, we might have different perspectives of how we get there, but we are not that different as human beings. We want the same thing. Now let's talk about the different ways that we might get there. So I think that values different perspective is what's needed a little bit more in some of these political conversations, that especially when it comes to housing can be so dry. Land use, zoning, it's a very dry and technical argument that you kind of get lost in the sauce if we don't kind of like pull back and think of, okay, what do we actually want to achieve here? So I think that in itself is such an effective leadership skill.
And it makes sense that your organization is called Common Ground, because that's what you're trying to find. And I love that. I love that. It's very applicable and needed.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we value quite a bit, I think, at TNE and all of us that participate in whatever way we do in this organization. I know that that's something that's a priority for all of us. And it's, challenging when we have come from places that are so strongly holding on to specific beliefs, and then we have to come to this place of like, no, there's actually like this really strong sense of values underneath that, and we just didn't really know it because it was covered up by all of this rhetoric and dogmatic beliefs and all of that. So I love how advocacy work kind of moves us from these very certain beliefs and into this more value-driven area. And, I'm an elder millennial, and I appreciate that transformation that's happened for me. And I always think, like, if this could happen for me, I was very, very driven by these beliefs for so long. So if I can move from this certainty into this curiosity space, anybody can. And I really do truly believe that. And I am curious, like, I know we've talked a lot about Gen Z, and I know that we've talked a little bit about older generations. this work, whether it's housing or other topics, I mean, what is the best and easiest way, I guess, for somebody to get involved in starting advocacy work if they haven't yet?
My biggest piece of advice would be to meet your neighbors. And I know that might sound very trivial, but I think we live in a society where the majority of people cannot name two of their neighbors. We don't know who we live near. We don't know who lives next to us. So I think starting to create relationships and connections with the people that we very literally live next to, live around, is a great starting point when you want to be able to move the needle forward as a community. And also getting involved with your neighborhood association. It looks different
Mm,
in across all cities, across the country. Sometimes it's called a neighborhood council, a neighborhood planning unit, but usually there's something that's even more local than your city council district. And when I say get involved, you don't have to be the number one engaged member, but maybe just attend one meeting to get a sense of who's showing up to these meetings, what is even being talked about. Sometimes we don't realize the different things that are happening in our neighborhood, but outside of our immediate bubble. And that can help
mm,
put the pieces together of the different topics that are being discussed and who the different people are that are in the room, and they're representing you. They are advocating for you. So it could be beneficial to just show up to the room
Mhm.
and know who those individuals are.
Showing up
yeah,
is
that's
half the
such
battle,
a good.
honestly.
Yeah,
It really
Yes.
yeah,
is
and I
half the
actually
battle.
want to name for those of us who tend to take on more than they should. I love the thought of like just attending a meeting. Like you don't have to immediately become like super involved. I like to think a lot about, we talk a lot about perfectionism, and that can really get in people's way of even starting something. But this is also just practicing, right? All of this advocacy work is practice. It is being in a place and seeing what you can do. So even one meeting just to see what happens. And
But also,
maybe
you
it's
can't
like,
advocate for something you don't understand, you know? So just going to
yep,
sit and listen is so important so you can just consume and retain the information that you're getting, and then you can figure out what your next steps are. But that's a really good
yes.
starting point. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to
No,
to make that point. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it made me think, Melinda, of the thing that you say all the time, like everybody has their thing, right? And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
I think if you don't yet know what that thing is, whether it is being online or going to meetings or maybe becoming a lobbyist or whatever, like you got to
Yeah,
figure it out somehow. And so it's such a great way to enter into this space with some
absolutely.
simplicity and maybe not a lot of
Yes.
pressure.
Yes, it's the
Yeah.
pressure, I think, that
Yeah.
scares people.
And and I really love the idea of what you mentioned, Melinda, as you can't advocate for something that you don't understand.
Mm,
And I think oftentimes half the battle is, like you were saying, showing up, because oftentimes I find that I meet people who maybe want to be in the room, but they think, oh, well, I'm not knowledgeable enough
mhm.
about policy, or I'm not a zoning expert, or I don't know anything about politics. I didn't do well in my, US history class or whatnot. But I think part of the work is dismantling the fact that you have to be an expert, because the whole point of the room is to bring community members together. It's
Yeah,
okay if you know nothing about zoning, but just showing up with the information that you have, even if the information is zero. It could just be your opinions and what you care about and what you think is important. I would like a park to be able to walk my dog. Boom. That's a perfectly valuable opinion for you to go and sit and listen to what's going on. You do not have to be some sort of political expert to be in the room.
I love that.
Mm.
And it's super encouraging, especially people listening, because the entire point of this show is to give people options on how to show up and how to advocate. So I love that you're giving those very simple and attainable steps for people. So as you're looking at the work that you do and the advocacy that you're doing, what is giving you the most hope about the future of your advocacy work?
I think what gives me the most hope is the more that I am involved in local work, I get to meet everyday people that are really doing such amazing, incredible work. People that care about their community members, their neighbors, people that truly care about the future of where they live. And I think sometimes what is highlighted is kind of the opposite of that, or what's highlighted is an environment where we might feel very small and not capable of creating impact. But I think the more involved I get into this work, the more people that I meet, the more that I realize that there are so many of us that care, and that care about not just the future of the environment and our communities, but care about each other and want each other to be safe. And that in itself gives me a lot of hope that there are people out there doing the good work.
Yeah, I love that. I
Yes.
love that.
I think it's a good reminder too that community is going to be what saves us, no matter
Hmm.
what happens. We kind of always come
Mm-hmm.
back to that same through line that it is in community. So, a great reminder today to meet your neighbors. It's a good reminder to me. I have met my neighbors, but if you asked me his name right now, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And so, just really good challenge for me today to get some names of some people in this apartment building I currently live in. Before we go, where can people find you and the work that you are doing?
Sure. So on LinkedIn, at Jennifer Borrero, and then on Instagram at jen.borrero as well.
Amazing. Jennifer, thank you so much
Amazing.
for joining us. We really appreciate it. And please keep doing what you're doing and advocating and just showing up, because you're setting a wonderful example for people. And I love the topic that you've chosen to be an advocate for, because you don't hear a lot of people really go, really go forth and advocate for housing. But it's something that we all need and something that affects us all. So thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Of course, we'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for supporting Advocacy Hour, for supporting TNE. We are going to be taking a break in August, and then we will be back in September with new episodes.
Yes.
Rebecca, what are you going to be doing in August in our break?
Ooh, I'm going to be moving my daughter to New York City.
Oh my
And
God.
I know, I'm like sad and happy and
Me
excited.
too.
And yeah, and then my youngest starts middle school. So some pretty significant things going on in August. How about you?
I'm doing quite a few things, actually. I turned 40.
Ooh, yes.
I'm gonna be a part of the club. Yeah, so I turned
Yes.
40, and I'm going to Vancouver by myself.
Nice.
I
Love
was
it.
like, I'm taking a solo trip. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to be by myself. So I'm going to Vancouver. But even before that, we're going to Martha's Vineyard, because one of the films that I directed is going to be screening at the film festival out there. So I'm really excited about that. And then Sienna starts first grade. What? I
I know
can't
time
believe
goes
it.
by so
I
fast.
know. Well, like, you're talking about your daughter going to New York and being in college, and I'm like, that's going to be tomorrow for me. I feel like
Yep.
I hate
Snap your
it.
fingers. It's crazy.
Oh my
It doesn't get
gosh.
easier.
It
That's all I
doesn't get
know.
any
It doesn't get
easier. Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
Nope.
So we're just over here, emotional moms, trying
Yep.
to get through our children's next milestone. But thank you so much for listening to this first full season of Advocacy Hour. We did it, Rebecca. We did
We
it.
did. I
We
was thinking
did.
about it the other day. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was a year ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Amazing.
Yeah,
Yep.
we did it.
Love
We
it.
made it. So we'll be back in September with new episodes, new guests, new ways to advocate and show up for your neighbor. In the meantime, make sure you join TNE Connect. Go to thenewevangelicals.com/connect. You can check out all of our free resources on TNE Action and our how-to resources and our educational courses. The list goes on. We got a lot of free stuff for you, so just take advantage of it. And if you'd like to support the work that we're doing, you can go to newevangelicals.com/support and make a one-time donation or become a monthly donor, because we would love for you to be a monthly donor. And we hope you have a great rest of your summer, and we'll see you in September.
Bye.
Bye.